Do we find the cost of freedom buried in the ground? Originally written as an anti-war song, these words, sung by Crosby, Stills, and Nash, hint at an eternal truth and an element of sadness, the sadness we feel when our freedom depends on the willingness of others to embrace a system of shared values and collective responsibility. Sadly, we know this is more a fleeting proposition and less a reality. Earlier this week, our synagogue, in coordination with our COVID task force, made the decision to close our synagogue and go all virtual, just as we did at the peak of the pandemic 1 year ago. Revisiting the past and making decisions based on it is uniquely Jewish. For centuries, the Jewish people have, by design and by default, had to confront the past to ensure a brighter future. Perhaps there is no greater example of this than in Parshat Shemot, the Torah portion we read this morning. Parshat Shemot takes us back to our painful past as slaves in Egypt and sets the stage for the greatest leader our people has ever known, Moses. In Parshat Shemot, we learn of a new Pharaoh coming to power. The new dictator is not familiar with the heroics of Joseph and our ancestors before that. Several hundred years have passed, and the Israelites are now in real danger. Pharaoh forces the Israelites into slavery and decrees that every Jewish boy must die. In the early verses of Parshat Shemot, Moses is born. His mother places him in a wicker basket, and he is thrown into the river. Moses' sister Miriam hides in the weeds by the river bank, waiting to see what will befall her baby brother. Sometime later, she notices Pharaoh's daughter bathing by the river. When Pharaoh's daughter sees Moses in the basket, she immediately knows that this is a Hebrew baby. For all of the Israelite babies Pharaoh decreed must be thrown in the river. In a moment of compassion, Pharaoh's daughter rescues Moses. Miriam sees this, and she quickly and skillfully maneuvers the situation, and she says to Pharaoh's daughter, Ha'elech vekarati lach isha mikneket min havriot veteknek lach et hayeled. Shall I go and get you a Hebrew to nurse this child for you? Pharaoh's daughter says yes, and Miriam takes her brother back home. This in and of itself is worthy of a sermon, one that we may need to wait an entire year for the next time we read Parshat Shemot. You see, Miriam is the heroine of this story, and she really never gets enough credit. She is ultimately responsible for Moses' survival. She's responsible and given credit, in fact, for his rise to power. And Torah scholars credit Miriam as being the mastermind behind Moses' success. But today I want to invite us to focus on another part of the story which I alluded to in the beginning of my Devar Torah. The idea that we not only learn from our mistakes, but that we find complete healing and wholeness when we embrace a system of shared values and responsibility. This week, as I mentioned, our COVID task force and our team made the decision to go back in time, to relive the moment our synagogue shut down a year ago. We looked at the surge in COVID cases. We compared them to that of the peak. We discussed the infection and transmission rates, which are up by more than 138% in our area. We talked about how religious institutions have a commitment to deliver spirituality and keep people safe at the same time. We explored the mitzvah of pikuach nefesh, which instructs us to preserve our health, our souls, and our lives at all costs. We talked about how, as Jews, our hearts and our heads work in tandem to create a spiritual experience for our congregants. Our hearts want to be together. Our hearts rejoice in singing with one another. Our hearts desire deep connection, but our heads need vision. Our heads need clarity. And it is up to us as an institution to provide leadership and foresight, one that will hopefully prevent the spread of a disease that has killed more than almost 6 million people. As Jews, when we hear the number 6 million, it sends a shiver down our spines. We are experiencing a sort of Holocaust, one that I believe we can control, one that we can at the very least attempt to curtail, one that we can help stop if we do our part. To those of you, our dear friends, who sent supportive and encouraging emails about our decision to shut down, we thank you. We know that you are all trying to do your part, and you are all trying to stay positive. To those who communicated their displeasure with our decision, you will always be welcome here. But let me ask you this. Have you sat by the bedside of a person inflicted with COVID as they take their last breath? Have you listened quietly with the phone to your ear as the parent of a child with COVID collapses from the emotional trauma of watching their child suffer? Have you been on Zoom with a family comforting them as their mother, their wife, gasps for air while lying on their hospice bed? Have you come home and had the stains of human tears on your shirt? There is no question that our synagogue closing for a month will set us back. I know that. Spiritually, emotionally, religiously, and the science is pretty clear. When people are detached and distanced from community, we inherently experience sadness identical to the loss of a loved one. And so that is why we stand reaffirmed in our decision, supported in our commitment to getting back to normal. And I want to suggest that the motivation for our decision is also found in this week's Torah portion. Moses in Parshat Shemot sees a burning bush, and God talks to Moses saying, "Do not come closer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you stand is holy ground." Our synagogue is a house of God. It is holy ground. Where we walk, where we pray, where we live is holy. And there is nothing holier than proclaiming health and safety in the name of God. Where do we find our freedom, as Crosby, Stills, and Nash ask? Is it buried in the ground? Does freedom come at the cost of human life? If you think freedom means being able to walk around without a mask, then I suggest you visit and spend some time with this week's Torah portion where we are enslaved in Egypt. I believe, and I think most of us do too, that freedom means being able to look into the eyes of the people we love, our family, our friends, our fellow congregants. It means being able to sit next to someone in shul while praying together without the fear of getting sick. Freedom is evolving, and we can only achieve freedom when we share the value of preserving life. On this Shabbat, when we are once again connected via Zoom, when painful memories from our past are revisited, let us also hold in tandem the hope that has sustained us for 2,000 years. Let us realize the holy work we are all doing to protect our community, and may we be blessed with the promise of a better tomorrow. Do we find the cost of freedom buried in the ground? Mother Earth will swallow you. Lay your body down. Shabbat Shalom.